Hall, who was 24 at the time of the tragedy, reportedly tossed a lit cigarette into the fireworks store, setting off an explosion and fire, killing men, women, and children, some who were not even 10 years old. Hall was charged with involuntary manslaughter but never went to trial. He suffered a severe brain injury when he was hit in the head while skateboarding at the age of 15. He was in a coma for weeks, and part of his brain was removed in an effort to keep him alive. Hall was said to have the mental capacity of a 10-year-old. Sheriff Roy Smith said at the time he believed Hall was edged on by two other men to throw the cigarette. Two other men were taken into custody after the fire, but were released and not charged. They were not identified by the authorities. Thaddeus and Gary Lewington terrorized the Newark and Columbus area for over a year. During this time, they robbed and murdered 10 people with a .22 caliber pistol. The brothers ultimately were caught after their final murder buying toys for their children with a stolen credit card from their latest victim. Both were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Thomas Dillon, the long-range serial killer, was a murderer from northern Ohio and trained gunman who took to killing people at long distances as a sport for 3 years before being arrested on a gun charge for owning a suppressed weapon. Soon after, the death penalty was removed from his conviction and he confessed to all of his crimes. James Rupert woke up around 4 p.m. Easter Sunday, 1975. He loaded his .357, two .22 pistols, and his rifle, and walked downstairs and proceeded to kill his entire family. This included his mother, his brother, his sister-in-law, and their 8 children. He first shot them in the lower extremities to disable them, and then finished them off. The massacre was over in less than 5 minutes. 3 hours later, James Rupert called the cops to report the shooting. He sat on the front porch until they arrested him. Anthony Sewell was a Marine who served for 7 years and ultimately returned home and started doing drugs such as crack cocaine. He allegedly raped multiple women during this time by strangling them until they passed out. He soon escalated to murdering the women while raping them and hid the bodies throughout his eastern Cleveland house, in crawl spaces, his basement, and shallow graves in the yard. When inviting his friends over for drinks or drug parties, he blamed the smell of decaying bodies on the sausage shop next door to his house. In 1869, Thomas Carr was engaged to a 13-year-old girl, he being 24 at the time, in Belmont County. After an outburst of anger, his fiancée and her parents cut off the engagement. He met his fiancée later that night on her way home from work, kissed her, and proceeded to slit her throat and stab her 14 times. When captured, he soon confessed to murdering 14 other people in his time of being a coal miner. While the gallows were being built for his hanging, he swung from them and played on it for fun. Herbert Baumeister was a diagnosed schizophrenic who had his own business and went on business proposals throughout Ohio. Baumeister's wife allowed the police to search their property, which led to findings of 11 men. 5 more were added to that list of bodies turned up, strangled on I-70 where his car was spotted, at many gay bars when victims were seen there on the same night as his vehicle. Baumeister committed suicide before he was convicted of all 16 murders. Kenneth Taylor was stopped for a routine traffic violation in which he said, "I am glad you stopped me because I just committed murder." Police, being skeptical, allowed him to take them to the body. In custody, Taylor confessed to 17 other murders throughout Ohio. He was convicted of 1 count of murder because the other cases were still being investigated. The notorious Jeffrey Dahmer was a monster killer in Ohio and Indiana. He had a long history of rape and murder, first of which was at 18, a few weeks after graduation. He was known to be a necrophiliac. After killing each of the 17 young men and boys, he proceeded to dismember them and consume them. He was sentenced to 16 life terms, or 957 consecutive years without parole. In the early 1900s, Paul Jaworski, an immigrant from Poland, became a gang leader in Ohio. He was known to rob banks, armored cars, and even stores. He was also well known in the region for his susceptibility to kill whomever angered him. Himself the Angel of Death, Donald Harvey, an orderly at multiple Cincinnati hospitals, reaped death over many sick patients and other patients who he was upset with. He also killed many of his lovers and people close to him, admitting to over 70 murders, but, quote, lost count after a period of time, end quote. Only tried for 25 accounts. He is sentenced to 20 life terms, or approximately 1,400 years in prison. He was able to do so by poisoning them with arsenic, cyanide, and rat